Hello, everyone, and welcome to our workshop, Inspiring Good Habits, Behavioral Change through Storytelling and Tools. We have a wonderful panel of 4 specialists today, and we're going to hear from all 4, and you can post your questions on the link that you have, and we will be taking the questions at the end of the presentations, so please don't forget to post them as we go along. My name is Tina Zrunadze, and I am responsible for strategic communication in the European Commission. And I'd like to start this workshop by framing a little bit the debate and explaining why behavioral change and storytelling are so important. Let me go to the first slide. Hopefully that will work. I cannot see. Oh, there we go. So, you all know, and that's why you're here, that climate change and environmental degradation pose an existential threat to Europe and the world. And to address these challenges, the European Green Deal is our strategy to make Europe climate neutral by 2050 by transforming almost every part of our economy, our society, and our life. The ambitious climate targets that we have set out in the European Green Deal will imply important behavioral changes for citizens alongside the ones carried out by industry. This is because almost all aspects of daily life, such as from the way we heat or cool our homes, the way we move or travel, what we buy, and of course what we eat, have significant impact on greenhouse gas emissions. Governments and institutions have several tools to stimulate this change. Laws and taxes are 2 of those, but ultimately it comes down to individual behavior change. And this is why we focus today on ways to make this change happen. In most cases, these policies for major transformations like the one we're about to hopefully have, take decades because of the locked-in infrastructure or the locked-in behaviors. But we don't have decades. We really need to act, and act now, act fast. And to speed up this process, we require strong and sustained communications. And not only that, we need probably new and better ways to communicate to encourage the positive behavioral change that we need to see. Because until now, behavioral and societal change around lifestyles and consumptions have not played a significant role in reducing overall CO2 emissions. In the last 10 years, household consumption, which makes an important direct contribution to total CO2 emissions, has remained practically constant, while other major contributors to CO2 emissions, such as manufacturing and electricity supply, have greened more. Let's see why this is. One of the reasons is, of course, information or lack of. Many people realize that they need to do something about climate, but they don't know what, or they think that what they do might be too small. It's a drop in the ocean. We've heard this argument. And they think that there needs to be something bigger that facilitates, enables this change, government, a bigger institutional change. And this is where the work we're doing under the Green Deal is so important. Some of the things that keep people back, sorry, I keep having to use the slider, and this is okay. Some of the things that are keeping people back, we're going to hear from our next speaker, are cognitive biases, changes in behavior that they feel that, or they don't necessarily consciously feel that are there, but are keeping us back. Also, social norms or what our peers doing, that has a huge influence on what we do and how we do it. So that's another part of the puzzle that we're looking at And finally, trust in authorities, trust in experts. We've seen how important it is over the pandemic, and it's going to be even more important to mobilize citizens to trust the answers that the governments are providing in addressing the climate change issues. Finally, the role of communication. Today we're here to discuss both the behavioral change, but also the practices, the tools that we can communicate with that will make people more aware of the impact that they have on the planet by looking at lifestyle and consumption habits, measuring the impact of their actions, and sharing some easy to apply tips. We know that good communication is a communication that looks at local and regional impacts, makes it very personal, personal benefits, focuses on the benefits that people can have from the climate, that can be things like health or deeper values, and highlighting also concrete actions that they can take. And of course, the role of storytelling, which is enormous in making this emotional bond with what we're trying to do. So let's dive into the topic. And first, we will hear from Hendrik Bruns, who is our policy analyst at the European Commission's Joint Research Center, and he will be speaking about behavioral change. And he will be starting now then. I hand over the clicker.
Thanks a lot, Tina. I'll just give it 1 second until the slides are going to be shown. I see or I probably have to click the green one first. One back to show you also my slide, so thank you very much. As you can see, I made a mistake on the slide in my title, and I saw it actually yesterday, but then I found, well, it's actually a nice title nice mistake, because it now looks like EU understanding green decisions, and I like that, so I left it in, and that was on purpose after all. So I would like to talk to you a bit, and I hope I'm going to not talk too negatively about it, because as Tina already said, I'm going to talk a bit about the cognitive limitations or cognitive barriers to climate action or to environmental action, because this is what we think about quite a lot in the JRC, in our Competence Center on Behavioral Insights. But of course, not just because we want to paint a very, very negative picture of it, but because we think that from this we can actually learn a lot on how to motivate people, on how to get people engaged in climate action. And, I will also, if the time allows it, tell you about 1 or 2 examples where we think that behavioral insights or this knowledge on the cognitive limitations play a role in actually informed European policy, climate policy. So I want to start with something with what we often say. Tina has already mentioned it. This is just to say that there's actually quite high concern among Europeans. It's not in every European member state, it's not always the same, but generally there is a high agreement that environmental problems are important, that climate change is happening and poses a significant threat to Europe or to the whole world. As you can see here, that this is data from the UK, but it's still representative in some way for the whole Europe. That especially in the last couple of years, there was a high engagement by, for example, Climate Fridays for Future. So there's actually quite a lot of awareness on environmental problems, on climate change problems among Europeans. But then if you think about it further, so this was what we say, but what is actually what we do? And I really like this graph, because if you have on the y-axis, you have the percentage of respondents that give the answer that are shown on the respective x-axis. And you can see, just focusing on the 2 bars on the left, the second from the left says that almost 70% of respondents actually say that it's important to them personally to protect the climate. But what I think is very interesting is that just a bit more than 10% actually say it's very important and I take action. So it's much easier, as you can imagine, that it's easier to say it's very important to do something, or to do something, anything, or anyone to do something about climate change and to protect the climate. But when it is about like, what can I, or what do I actually do? What actions do I really do? It's much more difficult. Especially if you then think about what should actually be done. This is from a very interesting scientific paper from Wines and Nicholas from 2017, and it shows specific individual actions on the x-axis that could be done on a personal level to contribute to climate protection. And this is, for example, I hope that you can read it a bit better, but it's, for example, not owning a car, so living car-free, avoiding transnational flights, buy a more energy efficient car, only consume green energy instead of gray energy. And these are ordered from left, so more impactful, to right, less impactful. Some of them are quite straightforward, some of them are not. So, I mean, not everyone can just buy a more energy efficient car. It costs a lot of money. But for example, it might be way easier, for example, to switch from a gray to a green energy contract. But still, it needs us to think about it, to make a decision, to remember, to look for alternative energy contracts, for example. So there's a lot of different sub-steps to this very easy appearing action. And that I want to go a bit into more detail on the previous slide and on the next slides. And just for you as information, the outer left bar that is very, very high in comparison to all others, it's actually a very weird sounding action that would be the most effective, and that's actually to not get a child, because if you get a child, then the carbon emissions, so it's their argument, will partly occur on your bill. But of course, that's nothing that is where anyone can ask anyone to make a change there. So we are only focusing on the other actions that are mentioned here. So, and I already said that there are some problems. So we often don't do specific actions, even though they're important. And one explanation of this is actually that we are often very lazy. So we are often prefer to do nothing. We just stick to the status quo. If we remain at the example of a gray energy contract, we have this contract maybe for long years. We never really change it. We know it's not super expensive. We get the energy, we get the electricity. So what if we now think about, well, do I want to switch to green energy? I would have to look for, like, go to a website. I would have to find a website where I can compare different alternatives. I would have to see which factors are important. Is it just green energy? What's the time that the contract takes? So how long does it run? How expensive is it? Is there any minimum time that I need to stay in the contract? So a lot of different decisions to be made, and this can already keep us from just saying, well, I just stick to the status quo, to what I've always been doing, and I just stick to that. And this is how often we remain in non-sustainable or non-climate friendly energy contracts, for example. So this is, for example, a website where you can, in Ireland, where you can compare different energy contracts. And then you would scroll down. So you can see here, it would be 41 results of different electricity contracts. You could then order them by price. You could order them by green versus gray, or a mix of both, by contract length, different factors. And there we can now switch from the barriers, so like I said, status quo bias, to a possible solution. So, okay, now we established people are sometimes a bit lazy. So what can we actually do about it? For example, the platform provider here could just list maybe the cheapest green energy contract always at the top. So it's always possible, maybe just on the initial slide, on the initial page. You can then order everything, you can change the order, but just if you show the 41 results, it's always the cheapest green contract that is shown on the top. And this, there's like scientific evidence that is shown that such a default setting, so always being on the top, actually increases the likelihood that people choose this energy contract. No one is forced to choose the energy contract. Still, you're allowed to choose differently. You're not being paid money in order to choose this. So you can choose this. It's easier to choose it because it's already shown at the beginning. So it makes it potentially a bit more easy for you to make this green choice if it's really what you want. Okay, so we or in this case, this platform provider uses the fact that we are sometimes a bit lazy in order to get us towards greener decisions. And this is basically the main argument that I wanted to make, so that that we can learn from that instead of assuming that we always make perfect decisions, that we always act like in a way that we want to act, that we never regret a choice that we make, instead of assuming this, the behavioral approach that we do in the work we are doing daily is more that we understand and investigate why people make systematic decisions or mistakes in specific situations, or why they make no choice at all because they're, for example, too lazy, and then to take these learnings in order to improve decisions, or make decisions greener. These are just the main takeaways that I would like to communicate today, and maybe just for some of you who are interested, a couple of books that I think that are very easy and approachably written from the popular science literature. The classics are usually by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. Nudging is a very, very prominent book that is currently being revised as a Nudging 2.0 book. Gut Feelings is going, for example, a bit more into why it's actually good that we don't always make perfect decisions, because actually, I mean, it's sometimes difficult to say what's actually a bad decision, or is it maybe in the end a good decision. But some that is maybe also very interesting for our communication people, where you're really into the communication and the storytelling aspect. And this book might be very interesting, by George Marshall, who is a climate activist, who wrote this book on the reasons, the cognitive reasons of why we have problems with dealing or engaging with or understanding or even being aware of climate change. That's a very good read, and maybe you're interested to look into that more deeply. That's it from my side. Thank you very much, and I hope I was in time.
Thank you, Hendrik. Excellent timing. Very good tips, both reading tips and also in terms of understanding how we all work as humans and how we can help people make the right choices. And this works very well with our next speaker, who is Sari Lane. Sari Lane is a specialist in sustainable everyday life in the organization Sitra, which is the Finnish Innovation Fund, and she will speak to us about a very concrete tool to help people make these decisions. Sari, the floor is over to you.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you for the opportunity to come here and tell about our work and tools and methods. So I'm Sari Laine, leading specialist from Sitra. We've been last 4 years doing a work for we want to inspire Finns to do more sustainable actions. So let's see if my slides work. Yeah, all right, good. We start from here. So in order to keep the warming under the 1.5 degrees, in 10 years, we need to go from roughly 10 tons of CO2 emissions to 2.5 tons of CO2 emissions. So the 10 tons here is the average Finns CO2 emissions footprint, but it's roughly compatible for all the Western countries. So from here, we can see that the drastic changes are needed in 10 years and also after that. When we started our work, we kind of realized that sustainability or sustainable lifestyle is many times perceived as a leisure of life. So you need to give up, do less, stop eating meat or stop driving a car. So messages promoting the sustainability have not resonated that well. Also, we noticed that there are some misconceptions of the impactful actions. So this study has been done in 30 countries. I'm not sure if this is the same that Henrik already shown, but these people were asked to state the most effective actions for battling the climate change. And as you can see, people answer that the recycling is one of the most effective actions, whereas it's very much overrated. So we need also information what to do and what is actually impactful action. So when we started our work, we started to study that what other motivations there are than just sustainability to our choices, how we can piggyback with other motivations and at the same time people change their behavior to more sustainable. And here is the most predominant motivational factors for Finns. This is actually done now also in Canada, in British Columbia, and other studies are studying us in different localities. You can see that there is also the environmental friendliness, but we notice that it hardly never is the first driver motivation, but as a nice bonus. So will you do something in order to maybe make your friend, family happy, but at the same time, if it's an environmental friendly action, it's a nice bonus. So for information shortage, we created a website of 100 smart actions. These actions can be sorted based on their effectiveness on environment. So they can have a large impact, medium impact, or small impact. And also by topics such as transport, living, food, etc. We have introduced the other motivations for every action. So we are not selling these actions just based on environmental impact, but also a good life action. Also, the actions are framed positively because our brains are wired the way that we always want more. So here also we propose more of a good things and not other way around. We also suggested people to do timeline for the next 10 years. So start with the small actions which get you going and then step into the bigger actions. But plan them as some of them may need some investing. So you need to know in well advance if you want to put the solar panels, for example. After we had all the 100 smart actions, we started to think that who really has time and interest so much that they would go through all the lists. So we designed the lifestyle test, which will calculate the carbon footprint of a test user with easy 27 questions. And after that, it recommends you the proper actions for you to take. So if you don't own a car, it won't give you a suggestion of change the car to electricity one, but maybe something on nutrition side or in housing. This test has been done now over 1 million times, and as in Finland we are only 5.5 million Finns, so quite many of us have already taken the test. So there are many people who are really interested in how we live and how we can impact on lowering of CO2 emissions by changing our lifestyle. So shortly, keys to well-planned tools are you need to know the base, the current impact, and where it comes from. So in Finland, it was this 10,300 kilograms of the average and how it's divided. Then it's really good to study of people. What do they like? What are their attitudes? What are their values? What they're motivated by? And based on this information, build the suggested impactful actions and create a test for it. After the test, we give a funny profile as a test result, which test takers can share through social media. And this really went viral. So people were we want to know what kind of a flower we are, which wine we are. So we also kind of want to know, am I a threat or opportunity for the planet? And also make a social media year clock and plan how you can use other meaningful dates like Easter, Christmas, National Cinnamon Fun Day, and offer smart actions with their hashtags. So piggyback with other hashtags. Here are some of the numbers of the effects of our tools. we also believe that through individuals, we get to the larger system change. So when our values, attitudes, and behaviors change, we start to change the system through social norms, policies, and markets. So really shortly, we are in a phase that we have now collected some of our methods in a Shift 1.5 toolbox, which is open in our website. So if there are any change makers there online, you can just Google Citra and Shift 1.5 and you'll find tools for you to use. On the left side here, you can see our philosophy. So everything needs to be, when you start to do the change, everything needs to do human-centered. Why somebody would use your tool, why somebody would be interested. Use the positive framing, always more of good things than less of a bad things. Peer-to-peer, so no communication from up to down, but more of a how you can excite this grassroots communication. Use other motivates to act. So many times with the sustainable actions, there are other benefits like saving money, saving time, community, well-being. So use those. Explore a mindset. So nobody is the perfect in this field. All the time is coming new solutions. So how we can have this continuous learning mindset. And then, of course, a real science to action. So here's just a short little picture of the tools that you can find from our webpage. You can Google them or just be straight in contact with me, for example. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sari, for this presentation. Very, very clear and very interesting to see how you came about doing this calculator and what kind of science it was based on, but how you managed to make it into something fun and something that really brings these actions into a positive frame. Just a quick question from me, is this test available in English? Because I'm sure quite a few people in our audience will be interested in taking and seeing what flower they are.
The test is available in English, only the calculations are based now for the kind of a Finnish consumer, but you can test it and maybe see if you want to have some kind of tool in your country.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Sari. And let's move on now to our third speaker, who is Sofia Grillo. Sofia is the founder of the NGO Reboot, which is an NGO that creates a community around restoring the planet. And she's also a climate ambassador. So welcome, Sofia, and the floor is open to you. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. I'm here as a lead of Reboot. I want to present you my personal history on trying to find and connect everyone in fighting the climate change. So I have not found it alone. I had my Souza with me, and we started by this sentence. We want to commit everyone, includes the indifferent, in solving climate crisis, which is a very big challenge because if they don't care about this topic, how are we going to motivate them to get involved? So we started 5 years ago creating very strong story lines, and we started in TEDx Lisboa. That's where we got some experiencing and creating events and trying to involve people and inspiring to make a change. This is an event we did 2 years ago when people could be together, and we had 1,500 people seeing our talks. And in 2020, we had to adapt for a virtual stage, and it was also very nice to have this background full of color in green. But today I'm here not to talk about our previous experience, but to talk about the present. And we in Reboot want to create a community focused on the same commitment, which is to restore our planet, even if at different rhythms. We want everyone in the same direction. And for that, we have our values, which is compromise, inclusion, transparency, and sustainability. Why is sustainability so important to include? Because nowadays everyone is talking about it, and it's starting to be don't have a real meaning. So because everyone is abusing of these words, no one really understands what does it mean. So we wanted to create two kinds of events. One is the Reboot exhibition, which is very focused on storytelling. We want to cover these 5 topics: materials, energy, nature, transports, and alimentation or food. We have alimentation because in Portuguese it starts with the A, and we want to create the menta words. It's easier to memorize, and that's a very important characteristic for people to start to get involved. And we want this exhibition to be free in the middle of the city, so everyone who passes can be curious, because as humans we are very curious about new things. So we had that in mind when we are creating this storyline. And we also have talks and workshops. This will be 1 per month. We have started last weekend with Rethinking Tourism Future. And what do we think about this? How do we think about these talks and workshops? We had to create it around topics and themes that are different from sustainability. If we want to focus on indifference, people who are not interested in climate change, we have to go for their passions. We know that there are only 3 ways to actually change behavior. 1 is love. We have to talk about what they already like. 2 is glory or status. We have to make being sustainable cool. And also we have, sorry, I just have a blank in my mind. We have love, glory, and money. We have to talk like you can save a lot of money by being sustainable. And we have these events, so we have Rethinking Tourism, Repair a Bike, making it easy, how to influence how influence work these days, urban gardens, and refugees perspective, circular 2021, and zero waste Christmas dinner. These are events, as you can see, from very different thematics, and that's very important. So we can get some people in this event and another ones in other events, so everyone gets involved. And we already have, of course, social media, and in here we have we try to simplify, educate, and connect people with the different topics. And we have 1 color for each topic of the exhibition: materials, energy, nature, transports, and foods. And that's very important. I would like to ask if you could press the video now. Is it possible? No. If not, I will just say, the video is just trying to appeal people to actually make a change and get involved in this work. If it's not possible to pass the video, I will end.
Let's see.
O Reboot é para ti. Sim, para ti. Para ti que estás farto de ouvir falar em lasanha vegan, e para ti que tens vegan na bio do Instagram. Para ti que metes tudo no mesmo saco de lixo. E para ti que ralhas bem alto sobre o lixo que o teu colega não recicla. Para ti, cheio até às orelhas com posts sobre sustentabilidade. E para ti que marcas os teus amigos em memes sobre plantas. Se comes sempre fora ou és pessoa de marmitas, se compras roupa todos os meses ou crias a tua própria roupa, se não tocas em nada que diga eco, ou se te deixas tocar pelas causas de um mundo em mudança. Independentemente do que te faz mover, as consequências são comuns a todos. Está na hora de fazer reboot.
So I will end here just to say it is in Portuguese because it is important to talk in our mother language, to connect, to make everyone understand the message, and just to feel more like this is for me and not only for the others. So thank you very much, and that's it from my side.
Thank you, Sophia. Very inspiring project. I really like how you focused on those three: love, glory, and money as motivations for human behavior. I think you're spot on those. Before we move to Alexander, can you tell me, this exhibition is obviously going to be a physical event. Do you have any online, any virtual version, or it's going to be 100% physical?
We want it to be 100% physical, but we want to move from country to country and city to city, so it will be able to be in more than one place, so everyone can visit and be local, so we don't have to travel very long distance to see it.
Very nice, very nice. Looking forward for it to come to Brussels. Okay, great. So let's move to our last presentation. Last but not least is Dr. Alexander Frech, and he is CEO of the AMI Blue Group, which is a world leader in GRP pipe delivery and development. And he will tell us all about it because he's also a climate ambassador for the European Climate Pact. So, Alexander, the floor is over to you.
Thank you, Tina. Thanks for everyone. Yes, we just impressively saw that sustainability has many phases, and I like to think of energy, for example, as the source of economic development or the fundament for economic development, and water as the source or the fundament for life. And I would like to talk a couple of minutes about water. We all know that water is important in itself, and the availability of water, but also water treatment, sewer, wastewater treatment is very important and vital. But it is also a source of pollution. It is also a huge market, and AMI Blue is not an NGO. We are in for-profit business. But I don't think it's a disagreement. I think it's much more very important to think how do we develop water management infrastructure in a sustainable way, both economic sustainable and environmental sustainable. And if you just take the EU, there is one gross domestic product buried under earth in the EU just for water and sewer wastewater infrastructure. This is not adding all other water relevant infrastructure like stormwater retention tanks and other things. So this is a huge market. And in this huge market where, again, one annual GDP is buried, if we assume that we are maintaining 2% of this infrastructure per year, this means after 50 years we are renovating. Now today this is much less than 1%. So this means the infrastructure has to last much more than 100 years. And here comes now the problem. We have the situation where even in the EU, even in very developed countries like, for example, France or the UK, more than 30% of our water or wastewater is getting lost due to bad or old, not maintained infrastructure, bad pipings. And in other continents, this can be even much worse. And there are statistics that roughly 10 times more people annually are dying because of bad water quality than on natural disasters and wars and conflicts together. So getting this fixed is really, really important. But we shouldn't get that fixed in a way that is then again increasing our CO2 footprint or triggering more industrialization and borrowing resources. So this is exactly what our headache is about. How can we develop water management infrastructure that is long-lasting, low in carbon dioxide emissions, or maybe even CO2 neutral, and once structured and implemented, provides safe access to water, but also safe treatment of wastewater. Our organization is doing that. We are delivering projects in over 140 countries on Earth. We are having a research center in Norway. And we actively and consciously, as a management board with our top 40 managers around the globe, decided to invest additional resources on targeting in having CO2 neutral pipe infrastructure available over the next 2 or 3 years. And if it's going to be 4 years, I'm also fine. But the idea is to have CO2 neutral, long-lasting, reliable pipe infrastructure. We're doing this using a material called glass fiber reinforced composites. It's the very same material that, for example, is used for blades in windmills or for boats. This material is very long-living and long-lasting. And if we think of it the right way, also today, most European cities, or all European cities, are living off the infrastructure that was being built over 100 years ago. Of course, it needs maintenance today. But what I really do think is wrong, and we are actually doing as a society, is we are replacing infrastructure that's meant to last 100 years and longer with material solutions in concrete or in steel, in ductile iron that is then bound to last for the legal warranty period a couple of years. And the latest, after 20 or 30 years, this infrastructure goes bad and we have leakage problems and so on again. So we really think that we need to bring all our energy together to force a big change in having also longevity and lifetime considerations, but also CO2 emissions and CO2 footprint as a decision-making factor for infrastructure procurement. And we also believe that regulation can help there a lot, because today most of the money for water management infrastructure is being spent by the public institutions, by cities or by other regional institutions. And our big focus is on developing CO2 neutral infrastructure solutions, and at the same time getting regulators there that it's not all about the price, because of course a short living product it will always be cheaper than a long living product, but it should also be about CO2 emissions. Last sentence, and of course we are well aware that composites materials like our pipes do have one big issue, and that is the question of can they be recycled. And as a matter of fact, this is very difficult to recycle them. This is also the big issue with windmill plates from wind energy, for example. They are landfilled today. They last as long potentially as nuclear waste. So same issues here. And we are dedicating currently $1 million annually in developing solutions how we can recycle composite material like from windmill plates into pipes. And this is what we jointly as a group decided in a big process where everyone around the world could contribute. And we have a lot of tailwind in this action, and it is very, very motivating. And I really thought I'd like to share this with you. Yeah, thank you for listening. I'm open to answer any question you might have.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you to all of you for being also so good with the time, which means that we have a nice 15 minutes to take some of the questions that have been coming in. So the first question is about science, and I'll ask Hendrik to try to answer it. What is the responsibility of scientists to communicate their research results and to avoid misconceptions by the general public? And if you think there is a responsibility, how would you go about doing it? Please be brief in your answer, Hendrik.
Yeah, thank you. So I think there is a limited responsibility. I know for my work, for example, it's important because at the JRC we have to frame research findings for policymakers. Policymakers don't have super much time. They are not experts in the field, but they need to understand everything. So we have to strike a balance between communicating the detail, the scientific elements, but also in a very understandable way. And that's, I think, what scientists can improve much on, including us, of course. On the other hand, I think there's also a big responsibility of media outlets, for example, to communicate. We have all seen that during the COVID pandemic, for example, to communicate scientific findings in the most simple but also representative way that still communicates the facts. And also on the side of the public to actually look for scientific evidence and not fall prey, for example, to misinformation narratives that are spread by not unreliable sources.
Thank you, Hendrik. Indeed, the role of science is important in terms of communicating science and making it understandable and palatable. Alexander, when you were talking about the pipes and the whole infrastructure and how, you know, when it's cheap, then you have to replace it more often. It made me think of the phrase buy cheap, buy twice, which is I'm sure existing in all countries, in all languages. I wanted to go back to something that we all talked about, that when inspiring behavioral change, we talk about the benefits for, you know, the people who should do this change, and we all agreed that it can be money, as Sophia said. So the economic benefit is a strong one, but it's not the only one, obviously. How do you feel the balance is between those benefits when you're selling your products out there? How much do you focus on the economic, and how much do you focus on the climate sustainability benefits?
The question goes to me, right?
Yes, please.
This is something that makes me very sad. We have two big customer segments. One customer segment is the public market. These are institutions, cities, etc., often to way more than 50% financed by the EU. And the other segment is the private segment. And I would like to split my answer to these two segments. When it comes to the public segment, we were reviewing in the last 5 years, the tender processes within Europe, and we are doing business in all European countries. And there were only 2 projects where sustainability aspects played a role, a 10% role. All other hundreds of submissions and tender projects to the government, to the institutions, and to the public work, the only thing that was counting is price. Yeah? The only thing. And these 2 exceptions were in Norway. Yeah? So 2 Norwegian projects from the government tendered had also longevity and CO2 emissions as a criteria for the decision making. Whereas when we talk about the private sector, that in some countries these are, for example, energy companies. We are doing also a lot of hydropower schemes for hydropower stations. Or mining or other things, then this is changing a lot. There is a mix of criteria which is then usually being applied, and not so much carbon dioxide footprint, to say not at all, but longevity and service time is a criteria. Yeah. but it needs to change in both fields drastically, I have to say. I mean, we had a super nice project, and all our projects are so close to life. For example, this is now out of Europe in Morocco. We had a very nice project. There is the Atlas Mountain area where a lot of mining takes place. They use groundwater, drinking water for that. Morocco is ranked 22nd on the most water-stressed countries in the world. And they don't have drinking water in Casablanca and in other cities. And they use very bad quality water there. And one of our projects was meant to deliver the water from the Atlas Mountains, the good water to the region, and from a desalination plant where salt water is getting desalted, then to the mining field. And this project is financed by the European Development Bank. In the end, they were taking, in this case, iron, which is corroding in the desert sun. And after 20, 30 years, this is gone, simply because of a price difference of 10%. Yes. So that is these kinds of stories where I think we put a lot of energy in making this not even CO2 low, but CO2 neutral. But at the same time, we are focusing a lot on decision makings. And honestly, for the private sector, and then so for companies, we need a CO2 price of around 100 euro or US dollars to enter this into decision making. I really think that would be the right price level for certificates. And then I think we would also see a big change in focus on CO2 as a decision making factor for infrastructure procurement.
Thank you, Alexander. You touched upon some very important, the whole supply chain decisions that have to be made. And these are part of the new rules that are being elaborated now in the European institutions to make sure that we associate the impact of all these new regulations with the ultimate, the impact, the climate impact deep into the future, and take into these considerations.
Let me please add, Tina, I'm aware of that, and I very much appreciate this from my heart. I really think these are the right moves, and I do very much appreciate that we have the ability to contribute, to work together, and to make here this joint effort. And I really do think that on the long run, all these efforts we are taking will put us also in a very competitive position, and therefore I can justify this in the face of my shareholders investing this money there, because I really think this is also a good business decision. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. Spot on that. Can I move back to the research and the misconceptions, and ask Sari, how has this balance of the different benefits been something that you have dealt with? Where do you put more weight, if you do put more weight on some of the benefits, and how do you deal with those misconceptions, like the one you were talking about, recycling, and how that's important? How do you try to change people's misconceptions around those?
Yeah, well, Citra, as an organization, that's kind of our main job as well, to put the science into action and find the ways that how we can, like Hendrik said, simplify and make the science more approachable, kind of popularize it for a greater audience. And that's what we're doing all the time. And I really think that when people start to change their kind of a mindset and value, I think that's also the way to go to policy making. Like I said, that we change the social norms and policy making and the markets at the same time. So we are the ones that can kind of put the system and systemic change forward. So that's what we're doing all the time, and that's our job, to make it more, to make science more digestible, really.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Sophia, if I can ask you one of the questions that has come in, about the post-pandemic and how citizens may perceive that climate change is not as urgent as phasing out of the pandemic, and if this is something that you are thinking about and how you're going to tackle this, especially since you're planning some events that are going to be very physical, as you assured us. How do you see this transition and in people's mindsets seeing climate change as the big, the next big challenge?
I think we are facing a very good time to make a change. So we are in the time we have the opportunity to make something different now, because we have gone to a new reality. We have seen how we can adapt in a very short time to a new reality. So this is the time to make a change, and for people to understand that this is our next challenge to address after we have controlled the pandemic situation. It's important to stop pointing fingers and say it's your fault, it's the other one's fault. We have to know that everyone can make a change, because one person can influence the person next to them, and that way we can influence everyone. And I think that's the way we can show that climate change is the next challenge to address.
Thank you, Sophia. This makes it very nicely to show the positive angle. And one of the last questions that we have, and now we have to wrap up, is about how to sell this rather negative message that there is some cost to these decisions. These changes can't all be super positive, and this discussions at small steps will be enough that we've had in the past. This narrative has to change, because they're no longer enough. We need something bigger, and as all of you said, we need to really make a big kind of push altogether. I'd like to give you the opportunity to give one last sentence of takeaways to our audience before we wrap up the session, starting with you, Hendrik.
I would say I think the most important thing that climate action or climate protection behavior will become more mainstream is to make green decisions and sustainable decisions as easy as possible, so that we need as least effort as possible.
Thank you, Hendrik. Sari, over to you.
Yeah, I think that we always assume that sustainable lifestyle is somehow less of life. So we have actually research that people who do the sustainable actions, they are more satisfied in their life. We don't know which one comes first. So if they're satisfied there in their life, and then they start to do the sustainable actions, or other way around. But there is a correlation in between. So with those methods, I think we should go forward.
Excellent. That's a very nice insight. Sophia?
Yeah, so we make it easier, we make it more available, and I think we should make it, your action will make an impact on others, and you have to think about that when you are deciding to do something. And so I think that's a good message to take away from this.
Social impact of what you do, the peer pressure. Very good. Thanks, Sophia, for that. And Alexander?
I would say act, not discuss, knowing that this sounds weird in a discussion. But I think the moment we close the discussion, we all can act. And yes, it's from doing. I mean, if I think what I do next, I know I will do something. I will act accordingly and do efforts to make a contribution. And that's why I would close with saying act, not discuss. Yes.
That's a great way to close it, because we have been communicating about these actions that we all have been taking. We don't just discuss, we've been communicating and inspiring others, and this was the point of this session. we heard how we can research human behavior to understand it and then be able to guide it, measure these changes through the calculated test that Sari has, to inspire change that Sophia talked about, changing in behavior, and to also find the ways in which to make this change, to enable it to become more sustainable in the future with the work that industry is doing. So I'd like to thank you all for being so brief in both your presentations and your answers, which allowed that we dealt with all the questions that we got, which is great. Thanks to all of you, and I wish you a continued good Green Week. I wish that you can go to other sessions and that you'll have many more takeaways besides the one we've got today. Thanks to all of you. Congratulations.